This is an instructional video for the Mobius cast-on. It has the standard cast-on and a couple of peculiarities for the Wave Mobius cowl that you can find on Ravelry. So let's start with talking about the needles. They're very important on these sorts of projects. You have to have circular needles. You have to have fairly long circular needles. These are a 40-inch circular, which should be great. I have done it on something as small as 32, but I wouldn't recommend it. It gets really snug, particularly at the beginning. You want to have enough room that you can create a loop and still have flexibility to do your knitting. All right, so let's get on with the cast-on. So for the cast-on, we're just going to deal with one of the needles. So we're going to take our needle and our slip knot, put the slip knot on the needle, then we're going to slide that slip knot down to about halfway down, about halfway. It doesn't need to be precise. We're going to line it all up correctly after the casting on happens. So then we're going to bring that first needle back until it's parallel with your cable, and you should form a nice loop here. And then in your left hand, and this is regardless of whether or not you are a continental or an English style knitter, for the cast on you're holding your yarn in your left hand. You're holding it so that it kind of forms a little sort of a triangle here with your cable. You can just kind of let your tail hang. So the basic cast-on is also what I call starting with a pick. So to start with the pick, you bring the yarn down and your needle comes down, picks up the yarn, and back up to the top where you complete with a yarn over. So you now have your first 2 stitches. You will notice that you have the same number of stitches on the cable and the needle. You're just counting the stitches on the needle. And then you will continue in that pattern. You will come down and pick, come up, and yarn over. Down and pick, come up, and yarn over. All right. And then for the other way of casting on, my instructions will say either start with a pick or start with a yarn over. Starting with the yarn over is pretty simple. You just yarn over, and then you resume, pick, yarn over, pick, yarn over. You continue that until you have the appropriate number of stitches. All right, we have cast on our appropriate number of stitches, and we're now ready to start our first round. But first we need to get these stitches up here to where we're working on our yarn. So the way that we do that is we need to kind of adjust this, just give it a little bit of pressure so that it comes out and it's all lined up and it's the same length all the way around. And then just scoot your stitches around, and the initial slip knot tends to be the hardest, but these rest just flow. Or they do if you've done this enough times that they're nice and loose. That takes practice. Just go ahead and keep fiddling with them until they get on. So you should have stitches all the way around. And now we're going to check to make sure that our cable is lined up correctly. Out of the entire circle, you should have a single crossing point. So if we follow this down, those are parallel, parallel, and here's our crossing point. We can see where the cables cross over there. then parallel, 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 all the way around. Excellent. That one crossing point says that we have a Mobius. All right, so as you can see, we've done our cast on, and you should always be ending with a yarn over. That way you make sure that you have the appropriate number of stitches. If you aren't ending with a yarn over, you probably missed one or put an extra one in there, so you'll want to go back and recount. When you have the hundreds of stitches, it helps if you put a stitch marker every 20 or 50, however many you're willing to actually go back and recount. So on my patterns, I tell you to slip the slip knot before placing your round marker, stitch marker. So that'll be different from your stitch count markers. And then to actually knit, you're going to come, and if you space this out a little bit, you can see here we've got a bit of a triangle space underneath. We're going to knit into that space. All right, so and again here, we've got that bit of space just right there. We're going to knit into that space. And this makes sure that we have standard looking knit stitches. There are people who tell you that you should be knitting into the front leg of whatever the stitch is. I don't like doing that. That winds up giving you a half of your stitches are going to be twisted. So you proceed like that all the way around, and I'll see you when I'm done with that. Alright, so now we've gotten to the end of the first half, and it's time to start with the second. The trick is keeping the tail out of the way. That's kind of your show that you're halfway there, halfway through the first round. So go in just like before, and your stitch marker should be pretty much exactly under that first stitch. And then the rest of this should look and stitch up normally. You should have the legs all in the front, all leaning the same way, and very easy to finish the round. Alright, here we are at the end of the first round. Here's our stitch marker that marks the end of our round, and we've got 3 stitches left, so we're just going to knit that one. And then here we have, this one's our slip knot. I don't know if you can see, there's that knot there. And our last stitch. And for my pattern, we're just going to knit those two together. This gives us a nice snug joining between the end of our round and the beginning. Make sure we don't have any gaps. Alright, that's the end of the cast on. If you want to just keep knitting, you can just keep knitting around and around and around, and you'll wind up with a very cozy Mobius cowl. Or you can check out the Wave Mobius cowl pattern on Ravelry.